Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Canadian article. And the dogs will start barking right away. This is, I don't even remember which take this is. I've tried to do this a couple times. I'm going to give up on the dogs. They have decided they are barking at the cows today, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, this is an article which is entitled, Why Canada is Able to Do Things Better. Subtitle, most of the country understands that when it comes to government, you pay for what you get. And then the article tries to explain that you get what you pay for. Now, structural problems with the article. There's provincialism. There's a lack of balanced sources. There's some really crazy stuff in here. Part of the problem, of course, is that we're dealing with Canada. You want to compare Canada and the United States, you're dealing with a country that has a population smaller than that of California, and you're trying to compare that to the United States. They are very different things. Canada tends to be much more authoritarian and centralized. They have one political unit, like when you go everywhere from federal government down to local government, you have different political units. There's one political unit, one governing body for every 5,000 Canadian citizens. There's one governing body for every 2,000 American citizens. That's a huge difference. And then we have 10 times the population. So in America, you do have to literally deal with a lot of democracy. And in Canada, you deal with a lot more authoritarianism, centralized authoritarianism. That's a significant difference. And Canada's not the utopia everyone wants to put it out to be. They talk about, I'm not going to touch healthcare. The article touches on healthcare and uses healthcare as a way to bash the United States and prove that we don't handle government properly. Not going to go there in this video. However, it's not, the Canadian healthcare system may not be as utopian as they put it out to be. They present, the author presents Canada as a very significant utopia with a lot of general equality, and that's not true either, because Canada has a significant urban, especially urban, but it has a significant permanent underclass problem. Structural poverty in Canada is an issue. It is more of an issue by percentage of population than it is in the United States, which is actually kind of scary, because this is one of the areas where I think the United States really needs to step up a little bit. And when I say step up, I actually mean step down, because we have structural poverty that is mostly due to government action and policy restricting opportunity. And to be fair to Canada, Canada still has an expansionist, in natural resource terms and development terms, they still have an expansionist frontier society. They still have frontiers. They still have new things. And that's a big deal. It's a lot easier to get out of the Canadian poverty system if you're willing to leave it completely behind. Really go and leave. And that's a little more difficult in America. We're kind of full up, so to speak. Also, in America, 21% of... This is a paper which combines blacks and Hispanics into one thing. And papers do this. How they divide ethnicity depends on the message they want to send. Okay, this one compares Canada and the United States a little bit. And 21% of the American structural poverty permanent underclass, or 87% of it, is black or Hispanic, and they are 21% of our population. And that's a pretty big, weird number, and it has to do a lot with policies that enforce and create multi-generational poverty. You have that in Canada, but it's invisible, because you're talking black and Hispanic population is something like 1 or 3% of the Canadian population. That's a huge difference. It's different, okay? And so the majority of the permanent underclass or structural poverty in Canada is white and therefore invisible. I don't know why this is. But it's the same thing in America. You cannot talk about poverty, urban white poverty, rural white poverty. You can't even talk about East Asian poverty in the United States at this point, because these are somehow the ethnicity of the poor person makes them invisible. And I don't get it, but it's very much a problem in Canada, and it is one that is very difficult to find information on because they don't like to report it. But it's there, okay? Go to Montreal, go to Toronto, and it's very much present. It's present in Vancouver, although it looks a little different, and it's definitely less, okay? Vancouver is a much newer city in a lot of ways than, say, Montreal. So, as this author talks about the reason America doesn't work as well as Canada, remember these things. Remember also that Canada's tax basis is quite a lot of American money. Remember, the third or fourth largest city in terms of Canadian citizens is Los Angeles, California. That's the third or fourth largest Canadian city in terms of Canadian citizens. And that's a lot of money. It's a lot of income that is going back to Canada due to favorable business environments in the United States. And there's a whole lot of this. Buffalo, New York City, up and down the eastern seaboard, there's a lot of Canadians working in America to make money for Canada. I'm not saying it's a majority, I'm not saying it's a leech thing, but it is a fairly significant factor that you need to understand when you talk about business environments and tax bases. So, anyway, the article goes on to talk about America's failing infrastructure, and the first example is actually airports, not subways. It says that there hasn't been a major new airport constructed in the United States since 1995. The article that he uses as a source for that is an article about luxury airports being built by authoritarian nations as jewels in the crown of their national pride. And it's so bizarre I can't even understand it. Maybe this is a socialism thing, but he's literally complaining that America is not building luxury airports for upper-class elite patrons, and I don't get it. We do have problems with our airports. Our airport infrastructure is in constant need of upgrade, which is fine. It should be in constant need of upgrade. That's what a growing society does, is grow. But, he ignores airports. We just opened an airport in North Dakota. No one cares because it's not New York City. I don't know. People don't matter outside of his little zone of concern. Denver International, if you consider that the last major airport to be built, that was 1995. We have 7 or 8 that are being constructed now, actively being constructed, which are in a similar scale. And construction started after 2016, but I'm not going to go into that yet. One of the problems with building an airport in the United States is that we are very democratic, okay? Socialism isn't pro-democracy, and that's one of the things you need to understand. Social democracy is also not pro-democracy. They'll talk about it, okay? If they're trying to fight a Republican, the evil Republican, the conservatives, they'll talk about democracy, but only in a very limited sense, like democracy that obeys the orders of the elites. If you want to build a new airport in Canada, there's a point at which the government tells the citizens and the environmentalists to go pound sand because the government's in charge. In America, well, we have democracy. We have a lot of democracy. It's very powerful democracy. And if the environmentalists get together and get enough votes and decide you're not building your airport, you're not building your airport. So, in addition to government regulations making it more difficult to build an airport, because airports are mostly privately built, at least partly, in the United States, there's the democracy factor, and that is a big effect, okay? So, also the closing of the frontiers. We have airports where we need airports. What we need to do is upgrade the airports, which we do on a continuous basis. Atlanta and Chicago, there's three airports in the United States that are in the largest six of the world globally. Atlanta, Chicago, one other one out west. I don't know if it's Houston. It might be Houston. And they're constantly being upgraded. There's never a time when Atlanta is not being upgraded to some degree. That's a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's time to cut down whatever trees you've got left outside of Atlanta to build a new one. You gotta watch what you're going for here, okay? His argument about airports also, it's very much an argument about government funding and taxes, because in America, airports are at least partially paid for by private entities, by airline bonds. And that is a structural problem if you want to build national, government-owned and operated upper-class luxury airports. Very much a problem. However, it does seem to function. The reason three of the busiest 6 airports in the world are in the United States is because, hey, frankly, for all of its warts, our system is working pretty well, okay? Our population is not that large compared to the rest of the globe, but we have the airports. Think about it. Results matter. Then he gets back into his second thing is the Washington, D.C.'s semi-functional subway system feels like a World's Fair exhibit that someone forgot to close down. And I went into this a little bit in the first video. The DC Metro is a intermodal, multimodal system. It is not a subway system. It is a light rail system and a bus system and a intermodal personally owned vehicle system. That includes bicycles, not just cars. It has the best park and ride system I've ever seen in the world, and that's on 4 continents and 34 countries. And, I've done Paris, I've done London, I've done... Excuse me? Make noise there. I've done Rome and Naples and all over Spain. I've done Mexico. I've done Canada. I've seen mass transit in a lot of places, and the park and ride system for the DC Metro is absolutely amazing. Far better even than BART, and BART's actually is pretty good. The BART part of the Bay, the Greater Bay system. The bike trail system, especially with all the rails to trails that you've got on the Virginia side, but also in the Maryland side, and it works. Okay, it's an intermodal system, and it takes you into bike paths, really safe bike corridors for pedestrian access. It's fantastic, and the Metro buses actually work, which is kind of amazing. And the Metro system integrates with the Virginia and Maryland bus systems oddly well. Maryland's not as good as Virginia, but it works very well. It's especially notable when you come from another multi-municipal area, like if you're trying to do transit in interagency transit in the New York area. Holy crap, that's bad. Or the Bay Area, San Francisco area, which is just amazingly messed up. It's just, I'm trying not to cuss as much as I did in the last video, but it's hosed, dude. Okay? BART itself works reasonably well, but it ties into something like 8 or 9 other transit systems that hate each other, and they won't work with each other, and it's bad. Okay? Yeah, the Bay Area is just, it's the only argument I can make in favor of centralizing the government in terms of transit is, yeah, the Bay could really use like 7 or 8 fewer cities, or some sort of federal government or state step in and do everything. It's pretty bad. But the DC Metro is a fantastic system. It's an intermodal system. It works well with all of the different means of transportation. Even with multiple agencies, And this guy dismisses it as a semi-functional subway system. He's just flat out incorrect about this, about how it's structured, about how it works, okay? So, he talks about old bridges, and one of the things that people talk about when they talk about crumbling infrastructure, they'll do things like, there's a bridge out there that way several miles, and there's a bridge next to it. One of the bridges is old, from the 1930s, and it's a one-lane bridge, and it's mostly used for road trips or, auto tours. And right next to it, there's a new bridge, which is 4 lanes, and has, 10 times the weight capacity, and the old bridge still counts as part of the crumbling infrastructure if that's the goal of your writing. And this is all over the United States. We have older, you can call them obsolete or obsolescent, infrastructure pieces that we just keep around. Part of that is because we value history. Part of that is tourism. Part of that is just because it's still there, so use it. Doesn't mean we don't have the new infrastructure. And we do. So after his inane and ill-informed bashing of the DC Metro, he gets into the mandatory Trump bash. Trump is the divider, everything's hyper-partisan, whatever. And that goes back before Obama, but Obama made it worse. And Obama didn't make it worse because of the racists, Obama made it worse because you didn't build that, you bitter clinger. Very important distinction there. But we definitely have problems with how we're operating our government. But he seems to feel that while that is a problem, that is not the core problem in American decision-making on infrastructure. It's that we aren't willing to spend enough centralized government money. And he doesn't use quantities of money for that. He uses examples about individual hubs. He uses the Penn Station, in New York City, the Penn Station commuter hub as an example of how America isn't willing to spend enough money. And that's a really bad example. It's not about money. There are structural issues there, and no amount of money is going to fix it, even if you double the tax rate, which he suggests later on. He uses healthcare, which again I'm not going to get into, but he uses it as proof that Americans aren't willing to pay the government what they need to get the government services. And then he talks about private prison industry, which I have very big issues with, but it's not a privately funded industry. It's a government cash cow contracting to private industry problem. And he completely mistakes that and says that this is proof that America's not willing to spend money, government money, on services. But it is government money. It's not private money. So, whatever. He then uses the OECD tax rate, which is wrong. Okay, just so you know, the tax burden that they use is incorrect. And I'm just going to drop it, okay? And then he says it's really quite simple. When Canadian governments need more money, they raise taxes, and it's just part of life. And Americans tend to vote and force to not raise taxes, which is not always true. The taxes are going up. And he tends to say, he says that the American right, the conversation about taxes is magical thinking that's not realistic, because we talk about things like government waste, or the different governments, or what governments are supposed to pay other governments. And I don't think his logic really flies. And again, he's talking about his personal tax rate, and his personal tax rate, he says, is 46%, which is actually lower than it would be in the United States, but he works in the United States, and he claims that the number in the United States would be lower, which is not true because he doesn't understand the hidden taxes, which again is a conservative liberal thing. We conservatives tend to look at what they're paying in taxes and what they're getting for that. The biggest part of the infrastructure, though, that he's missing is government infrastructure. In the United States, the government infrastructure is so large that it literally paralyzes infrastructure building. Our government infrastructure is larger than Canada's population. Think that one through for a few minutes. Alright, this video is long enough. Have a good one. Stay sideways. And really do think about that. Our government infrastructure is probably... the waste from our government infrastructure is enough to turn around the infrastructure debate completely. That's a lot of billions of dollars right there. And it's something that he completely ignores. So, stay sideways. Have a good one.